Welcome back, everybody. As you saw in the last episode, I stopped in Singapore. And at least Singapore isn't South Africa, which is kind of where this movie is set. Stop 10 is Hong Kong with Herman Yau's classic film, Ebola Syndrome. So, in case you don't know what Ebola Syndrome is about, it's about a Chinese restaurant worker who is wanted for murder in Hong Kong contracts Ebola in South Africa and becomes immune to it, and then unknowingly spreads the virus there. Then he comes back to Hong Kong and continues to infect people with it. Now, I think this is the second collaboration that Herman Yau did with Anthony Wong, and with the first one being the Eight Immortals restaurant, The Untold Story, or just known as The Untold Story. This film, much like The Second Coming, there is some scenes in it where they could be triggering. So I'll put a time code at the bottom. You can skip to that to just see like my final thoughts on the film and the final rating. Starting off with the cinematography overall, I found was perfect. As with all Herman Yau's Category 3 films, he begins the film with a scene that encapsulates what the film overall is gonna have within it, or essentially the kind of themes that he's gonna be playing with throughout the film. The dialogue is comedic at times. The framing is great. The underlying theme of bullying is very prevalent in the dialogue. The effects are well executed, and the film actually has a similar restaurant scene as in The Untold Story. The theme of fate is also very prevalent when the daughter that we see in the first, like the opening scene, ends up in South Africa 10 years later and just happens to go to the restaurant that Kai is working at, and then has like a sixth sense. It's a really interesting element within the story, and I guess you could say it shows that the trauma that she suffered as a child has affected her on a very deep level that she didn't even know about. The theme of fate is perfectly executed within this story. The autopsy scene is very unsettling and definitely is very graphic. If I did have something bad to say about the film, the English dialogue is not very well written. It's passable, but it definitely could be better. But when you view it in the sense that this film is almost making fun of Category 3 films, the dialogue makes sense. So the look, like the color correction, creates an almost natural 90s look, and while it does feel dated, at the same time, that's not necessarily a bad thing in this movie's case. Yeah, everything just seemed very natural. It just had like a realistic kind of look to it. There's music cues for each infection and when some symptoms happen, and they work perfectly within the story. Editing creates an eerie tone that works so well for the film. Editing overall is perfect. Anthony Wong, his performance as Kai is perfectly done. Like, Anthony Wong is one of my favorite actors of all time, besides James Stewart. The audio mix is good, but some sound effects seem out of place, but somehow work. Maybe it's calling attention to that aspect of Category 3 films. The lighting feels very natural and adds to the realism of the film. Slow motion shots are effective in showing the moments of infection. Final thoughts are, if you appreciate the art form rather than and like the realistic approach that some Category 3 films use, regardless of what subject matter they deal with. I would say check out the film if you're a fan of like definitely Category 3 films, Anthony Wong, Herman Yao, just films of that nature. Yeah, if you can separate the subject matter and watch it as just a movie that is using certain elements that you don't agree with to portray the story, check it out. My final rating of this is going to be a 10. I'm not sure if it's on any streaming services, but you can always get a copy of it on DVD or whatever, and I'll see you in Taiwan for another, I guess you could say, outbreak style zombie film that's kind of almost like a slasher as well. Hope you enjoyed this review, and I'll see you in the next one in Stop 11 with The Sadness.